thin mist of ionized gas swirled around the alien cruiser HFY Dominion as it glided into the quiet edge of the nebula. The vast shape moved like a predator through dark water, its armored hull absorbing every flicker of light. On the command deck, Captain Yarrell leaned forward in his chair, his black eyes narrowing at the data streams flowing across the main display. An object had appeared on their sensors, small, slow-moving, and far from any established trade route. The sensor officer's voice broke the silence. Unidentified vessel detected, bearing 32 Mark 9. Hull composition, crude alloys, non-adaptive shields, basic thermal emissions. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. Yarrell's thin mouth curved upward. Primitive, he said softly, and alone. For generations, the Chthorian Empire had expanded without resistance. Their strategy was simple. Arrive unseen, scan thoroughly, classify the target species, and either absorb them into the Empire or erase them if they resisted. Yarrell had followed that script many times, and each time it had ended the same way, swift, bloodless victory. To him, this encounter looked no different. Begin passive deep scan, Yarrell ordered, his voice calm, almost bored. The crew obeyed without hesitation. Invisible beams of information began to probe the strange vessel, dissecting its metal skin, mapping its internal systems, counting the life signatures within. From the first readings, it seemed almost laughable: steel plating instead of crystalline armor, chemical drives instead of gravitic thrusters, weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of energy bolts. Around the bridge, quiet laughter rippled. One officer muttered, "They're not even level 3 on the scale." Another replied, "A single cruiser squadron could take their homeworld before breakfast." Yarrell let them talk. Overconfidence was a luxury his crew could afford, until the analysis was complete. The image of the vessel appeared on the main screen. It was small compared to the HFY Dominion, shaped with sharp angles and heavy plating that looked almost patched together. Its thermal signature suggested an old fusion plant, the kind most advanced civilizations had retired centuries ago. To the Chthorians, it was like finding an antique sword on a battlefield filled with plasma rifles. The first biological scans came in. Humanoid life forms, averaging less than 2 meters tall, bipedal, soft-skinned, low bone density. Oxygen breathers from a mild gravity world. Yarrell's lip curled slightly, fragile, just as expected. Then a pause. The science officer frowned at his console. "Captain, there is something odd about their data systems." Yarrell raised an eyebrow. "Odd how?" "They're primitive, yes, but contain vast amounts of stored information. Military archives, tactical simulations, records of battles spanning centuries." Yarrell's brow furrowed. "Military records on a vessel of this size?" "Yes, sir. And it is not scattered data. It is organized, categorized, analyzed. They have entire sections dedicated to studying conflicts in detail, victories and defeats alike." The captain's chair creaked as Yarrell leaned forward. That was not something he had seen before in species at this level. Most primitive civilizations fought small, local wars, then forgot half the details within a generation. These beings seemed to catalog every lesson, every tactic, every weapon. Still, he told himself they could not possibly pose a threat to the HFY Dominion. Knowledge meant little without the technology to use it. He was about to speak when the navigation officer's voice cut in. "Captain, the target vessel has adjusted course." Yarrell frowned. "Toward us?" "Yes, sir. Heading change. Direct line toward our position." A thin hiss of disbelief passed through the bridge. The HFY Dominion was cloaked, its presence masked by advanced stealth systems. No primitive ship should have been able to detect them at this range. "Coincidence?" Yarrell said after a pause, though his tone was less certain now. "Continue the scan." The science officer hesitated. "Captain, we are detecting irregular sensor emissions from their vessel. Narrowband sweeps. They are scanning the nebula." "Scanning for what?" Yarrell demanded. The officer met his gaze. "For us, sir." A chill passed through the bridge. The laughter from earlier was gone now, replaced by the low hum of tension. On the display, the human ship, A designation appeared now from their own systems. HSF Resolute shifted its angle slightly as if adjusting for a better reading. This course was deliberate, controlled, nothing like the drifting path of a vessel unaware of danger. Yarrell's mind ticked over the possibilities. Perhaps they had stumbled on a species with sharper instincts than most. Perhaps the data in their archives was more than historical curiosity. And perhaps, though he hated to consider it, they knew exactly who they were dealing with. "Continue tracking," he ordered quietly. "Let's see just how close they're willing to come." The alien crew returned to their consoles, but the atmosphere had changed. The sense of the hunt was still there, but the prey no longer seemed so helpless. The Resolute moved through the nebula like it belonged there, its drives firing in short bursts, making its silhouette vanish between sensor sweeps. As Yarrell watched, a single thought began to take shape in his mind, one he could not yet say aloud. This was no drifting relic from a forgotten world. This was something else entirely. And then the sensor officer looked up sharply, voice tight. "Captain, the human ship is now scanning us directly." Yarrell's hands tightened on the armrests. Primitive species did not scan back. Not like this. The bridge went silent. The hunt had just changed. The bridge of the HFY Dominion felt heavier now, the air thick with an unease none of the crew wanted to admit. The human scan washed over their hull in slow, deliberate sweeps, touching every contour as if they already knew where to look. No primitive species had ever done that before. Yarrell sat very still in his command chair, his black eyes fixed on the main screen, the glimmer of the human vessel burning brighter against the nebula's muted light. The science officer's fingers moved quickly over his console, his voice low. "Captain, this is not a simple sensor sweep. They're filtering the signal through multiple frequencies. It's sophisticated." Yarrell's jaw tightened. Sophisticated for them, or sophisticated for us? The officer hesitated. "Closer to our level than theirs, sir." That answer didn't sit well. The Chthorian fleet operated under the belief that primitive species could not detect their presence unless they made a mistake. But the Resolute was moving with the confidence of a predator that had found its prey, not one that was blundering blindly through the dark. The navigation officer's voice cut in. "They've altered course again. They're matching our vector, reducing the gap between us. At this rate, they'll close to short-range scanning distance in 20 minutes. Yarrell's clawed fingers tapped the armrest slowly. "They have no visual on us, correct?" "Correct, Captain. But it's as if they don't need it." The crew exchanged quiet glances. Most of them had served on dozens of contact missions, all of them ending the same way. The target species never realized the HFY Dominion was there until it was far too late. Now, for the first time, it felt like they were the ones being hunted. The communications officer raised her head from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting strange bursts on narrowband channels. It's not any standard hailing attempt. It looks like encrypted chatter between crew members." Yarrell frowned. "Translate it." She shook her head. "I can't yet. The encryption is layered, military grade. For them, impossibly advanced. They shouldn't have this." The science officer looked up again. "Captain, their biological scans were correct. They're soft-bodied mammals, physically weak compared to us. But every one of them shows dense muscle conditioning, elevated cardiovascular resilience, and, most troubling, brain activity patterns consistent with advanced combat training." Yarrell stared at him. "Are you telling me they're soldiers?" "Yes, sir. All of them. I've cross-checked the readings 3 times. They're not a mixed crew of specialists and civilians. They're trained combatants, every single one." The bridge grew quieter. This was no survey vessel, no wandering relic from a forgotten age. If these were soldiers, then their movements, their scanning patterns, their encrypted chatter, it all made sense. The sensor officer's voice rose slightly. "Captain, their scan is now targeting our sensor array positions directly. They're probing for weaknesses." Yarrell's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. That information should be completely hidden from them. Not if they've studied our hull geometry and guessed where those arrays would be." The crew began to murmur. the confidence they'd worn like armor now cracking around the edges. Yaril silenced them with a sharp gesture. Maintain cloak. Maintain silence. Let them think we're not reacting. For several long minutes, the two ships moved through the nebula in a strange dance. One hidden, one hunting. The Resolute adjusted its heading slightly with each burst of its thrusters, closing the distance with unnerving precision. Then the science officer stiffened. Captain, we're picking up low-power emissions from their hull. It's a form of passive radar, modified to blend with background radiation. I've never seen this configuration before. Yaril asked slowly, meaning, they're looking for the void we create in space. They're not searching for us directly. They're searching for where we shouldn't be. A deep silence fell across the bridge. That was the kind of thinking Yaril had only ever seen in veteran war species, civilizations that had been fighting for survival for millennia, learning to detect threats that were invisible to less experienced eyes. The communications officer straightened suddenly. Captain, short burst transmission detected. Destination unknown. Heavily encrypted. High compression rate. Yaril's stomach sank. They're sending a report. Yes, sir. Possibly to other ships. Yaril turned to the sensor officer. Scan the surrounding sector. Look for matching drive signatures. The officer's hands moved quickly. A moment later, faint traces appeared on the outer edges of their detection range. Small but deliberate energy signatures, hidden in the folds of the nebula. Multiple, the officer said grimly. Too faint for a civilian convoy. Military configuration. They're converging on this position. Yaril's claws dug slightly into the armrests. This wasn't a random encounter. The humans weren't just aware of their presence. They were hurting them, setting the stage for something larger. The navigation officer spoke again, his voice tight. Captain, the Resolute is now on an intercept course. Impact point is within weapons range. Yaril stared at the display. The so-called primitive ship was closing in without hesitation, and with the quiet, patient certainty of a hunter that had already decided how the hunt would end. He gave a single order, his voice low but edged with steel. Prepare for contact. The bridge crew moved quickly, but none of them spoke. The old assumptions were gone now. They all understood something had shifted. This was not going to be the easy victory they had expected when they first saw that small steel ship. And Yaril, for the first time in his long career, felt the cold weight of doubt pressing on his chest. The KRYTH Dominion glided deeper into the nebula, its stealth systems humming softly, but on the bridge no one felt hidden anymore. The human ship had kept coming, closing the gap with steady, precise moves. Every burn of its thrusters seemed calculated, every change of direction purposeful. Yaril's black eyes stayed locked on the tactical display as the image of the Resolute grew brighter in the murky field of stars and dust. Distance now at 32,000 kilometers, the navigation officer reported. His voice was low, almost reluctant. At this rate, interception in 7 minutes. The science officer checked his readings again. Captain, they're still running scans on us, but it's changing. The sweep is narrower, more focused. They've locked on to our position. They're adjusting as if we're moving, even though they shouldn't be able to see us. Yaril's jaw tightened. Keep our cloak stable. No sudden power shifts. I don't want to give them proof we're here. Yes, sir. But I think they already have it, the officer replied quietly. On the main display, the Resolute's path shifted again. It wasn't charging recklessly forward, it was angling to pass close, but just behind the Dominion's main weapons arc. That was a tactic Yaril had only seen in high-level fleet simulations, one designed to get close enough to strike without giving the bigger ship a clean shot. The communications officer straightened at her station. Short burst transmissions again. Same encryption pattern as before. Multiple pings to those faint signatures we detected earlier. Whoever they are, they're coordinating. Number of additional contacts? Yaril asked without turning. Still indistinct, but I count at least 3. Possibly more, all hiding in the nebula currents. The bridge felt smaller now, as if the nebula's dust was pressing in on them. The crew who had mocked the humans minutes ago were silent, their eyes fixed on their consoles, their hands moving faster than usual. Yarrell could feel it, the shift from easy dominance to a situation that was quickly becoming dangerous. The sensor officer's voice broke the quiet. Captain, new readings from their hull. They've deployed small drones. No energy emissions, very low signature. The KRYTH Dominion drifted in tense silence, its massive frame hidden in the nebula's thick dust. But every Chthorian on the bridge knew the human ship was no longer hunting blindly. The Resolute held its position just behind them, close enough to strike their engines if it chose. The only sound was the steady hum of the ship's systems, a noise that now felt more like a heartbeat in a predator's chest than the pulse of a hunter. "Captain," the communications officer said suddenly, her voice tight. "Incoming transmission. Short range. Direct line. It's audio only, no visual." Yarrell's jaw clenched. "Play it." A voice filled the bridge, calm, measured, and speaking in perfect Chthorian military dialect. "KRYTH Dominion, this is the human vessel Resolute. We are aware of your position and have been tracking you for 2 hours and 18 minutes. We request that you power down your active scans and maintain your current position. We have no hostile intentions, but we will respond if threatened." The bridge went utterly still. No primitive species should have been able to speak their language so fluently, let alone use proper military phrasing. The communications officer glanced at Yarrell, her face pale. "Captain, they learned this from us. From our transmissions." "Not possible," Yarrell said at once, but he didn't believe his own words. "They must have been listening since we began scanning them," she added quietly. The science officer leaned forward. "Captain, we just registered a surge in their computer systems right before that message. They may have built a translation algorithm in real time. That's beyond anything their tech level should allow." Yarrell didn't respond right away. He stared at the small ship on the display, its faint outline ghostly in the swirling nebula, and he realized it was no accident they were in this position. The humans had brought them here. The voice came again, exactly the same tone as before. "We have no desire for conflict, but if you escalate, we will act in ways you will find costly." The weapons officer shifted in his seat. "Captain, we can still turn and bring our main batteries to bear. They're smaller and weaker. We'd destroy them in seconds." "Would we?" Yarrell said softly. "Look where they are. They've neutralized our main firing arcs. If they strike our engines, we'll lose maneuverability in this nebula. And if their reinforcements are real, we'll be pinned." The navigation officer spoke, his voice uneasy. "Sir, those faint drive signatures in the dust, they're moving closer. Still faint, but closing in from 3 angles." The tension on the bridge thickened. It was no longer a simple standoff. The humans had set the board, and now they were moving the other pieces into place. The KRYTH Dominion drifted in tense silence, its massive frame hidden in the nebula's thick dust. But every Chthorian on the bridge knew the human ship was no longer hunting blindly. The Resolute held its position just behind them, close enough to strike their engines if it chose. The only sound was the steady hum of the ship's systems, a noise that now felt more like a heartbeat in a predator's chest than the pulse of a hunter. "Captain," the communications officer said suddenly, her voice tight. "Incoming transmission. Short range. Direct line. It's audio only, no visual." Yarrell's jaw clenched. "Play it." A voice filled the bridge, calm, measured, and speaking in perfect Chthorian military dialect. "KRYTH Dominion, this is the human vessel Resolute. We are aware of your position and have been tracking you for 2 hours and 18 minutes. We request that you power down your active scans and maintain your current position. We have no hostile intentions, but we will respond if threatened." The bridge went utterly still. No primitive species should have been able to speak their language so fluently, let alone use proper military phrasing. The communications officer glanced at Yarrell, her face pale. "Captain, they learned this from us. From our transmissions." "Not possible," Yarrell said at once, but he didn't believe his own words. "They must have been listening since we began scanning them," she added quietly. The science officer leaned forward. "Captain, We just registered a surge in their computer systems right before that message. They may have built a translation algorithm in real time. That's beyond anything their tech level should allow. Ural didn't respond right away. He stared at the small ship on the display, its faint outline ghostly in the swirling nebula, and he realized it was no accident they were in this position. The humans had brought them here. The voice came again, exactly the same tone as before. We have no desire for conflict, but if you escalate, we will act in ways you will find costly. The weapons officer shifted in his seat. Captain, we can still turn and bring our main batteries to bear. They're smaller and weaker. We'd destroy them in seconds. Would we? Ural said softly. Look where they are. They've neutralized our main firing arcs. If they strike our engines, we'll lose maneuverability in this nebula. And if their reinforcements are real, we'll be pinned. The navigation officer spoke, his voice uneasy. Sir, those faint drive signatures in the dust. They're moving closer. Still faint, but closing in from 3 angles. The tension on the bridge thickened. It was no longer a simple standoff. The humans had set the board, and now they were moving the other pieces into place. The science officer's console beeped sharply. Captain, they're running active scans of the surrounding nebula. But it's different. They're scanning for cloaked ships. They know exactly what to look for. How? Ural demanded. Experience, sir. They've fought enemies who hid from them before. These scan patterns, they're optimized to find distortions like ours. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the Dominion systems adjusted to the surrounding interference. Outside, the nebula's clouds shifted in slow waves, but Ural knew the humans were watching for every ripple in that flow. Captain, the communications officer said again, they're transmitting on multiple frequencies now. It's coded. I can't break it yet, but I'm almost certain they're feeding targeting data to the other contacts. The weapons officer's claws flexed. We can't sit here and let them box us in. Give the order and we'll cripple them before their friends arrive. Ural studied the small, silent shape on the screen. The humans hadn't fired. They hadn't moved aggressively. But everything they'd done was deliberate. Positioning, jamming, scanning, transmitting. If they wanted to provoke him, they were doing it perfectly. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. Maintain cloak. Hold fire. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we commit. Minutes stretched. The Resolute drifted slightly, adjusting its position, always keeping the Dominion's engines in its sights. Ural felt the weight of their gaze, even without visual contact. Then, as if to prove they controlled the tempo, the human ship's running lights flickered on through the mist. It was a subtle move, but it stripped away any illusion that they didn't know exactly where the Dominion was. It was a predator showing itself to another predator, saying, I'm here, and I'm not afraid of you. The science officer whispered, Sir, I think they're inviting us to make the next move. Ural didn't answer. He had no intention of taking that bait. But he couldn't shake the cold truth in his mind. These weren't primitives stumbling through space. They were professionals, and they were in control of this encounter. The voice came again, calm but carrying the weight of someone who was certain of their position. KRYTH Dominion, this is Captain Elias Ward of the human vessel Resolute. You have been conducting unauthorized scans of our ship. I will assume this is a misunderstanding, but I require you to cease immediately. Ural stared at the main display as if the small human ship might change its shape and reveal something else. His claws tapped the armrest once, twice. The fact that this Captain Ward was speaking in perfect Chthorian was bad enough. The fact that he was making demands without a hint of fear was worse. The communications officer looked uneasy. Captain, they're transmitting on a direct military channel, one of ours. That's impossible, Ural muttered. It's happening, she said. They shouldn't even know the encryption protocol exists, but they're using it as if it's their own. The science officer added, Their signal strength is low, just enough to make sure only we hear them. That means they know exactly how far away we are and how strong our receivers are. On the display, the Resolute's hull lights glowed faintly against the shifting nebula dust. It was drifting sideways now, slowly rotating so one flank faced the Dominion. It was not a posture of submission, it was a deliberate move, revealing a row of recessed launch bays along its side. "They're showing us their weapons," the weapons officer growled. Yarl shook his head. "No, they're showing us that they want us to see their weapons." The voice returned, the tone polite but with an edge. "We are not here to engage your vessel. However, if you continue your current approach, you will trigger our defense protocols." And, "Captain Yarl," hearing his name made Yarl's breath catch. "I suggest you consider the cost of what you're doing. We've already contacted our fleet. Reinforcements are inbound." The navigation officer quickly checked his console. "Captain, those faint drive signatures are closer now. Multiple vectors triangulating our position. Whoever they are, they're almost within range." The communications officer looked up sharply. "Message from the human ship on a secondary channel. Unencrypted this time. They want to make sure we hear it clearly. They're sharing a data burst." Sir, it's a partial schematic of our ship." Yarl turned toward her slowly. "They're sending us our own schematics?" "Yes, Captain. Highlighting engine clusters, primary power cores, shield generators." The weapons officer hissed. "That's a firing map. They're showing us they can hit us in the soft spots." For a long moment, Yarl said nothing. His crew's eyes were on him, waiting for his decision, waiting to see if he would choose to strike now or stand down. The Chthorian way was to dominate, to crush resistance before it could grow. But this was not resistance in the usual sense. This was precision, planning, and the kind of confidence that only came from knowing the other side's weaknesses. The science officer broke the silence. "Captain, their ship's energy profile still matches a low-tech patrol vessel. But their tactics, this isn't the work of a species that stumbled into space by accident. This is the work of a military that's been training for encounters exactly like this one. They're stalling," the weapons officer pressed. "If we hit them now, before those other contacts arrive." "If we hit them now," Yarl interrupted, "and they survive long enough to disable our engines in this nebula, their reinforcements will have us surrounded before we can recover." The weapons officer closed his mouth. No one liked to hear that the bigger ship could be outmaneuvered, but the possibility was real. The human captain spoke again. "You may think our vessel is small. You may think our technology is primitive. But understand this, we have spent generations preparing for enemies with advantages in size, numbers, and firepower. If you force our hand, we will fight in ways you are not prepared for." Every word came without anger or panic. Ward wasn't trying to frighten them. He was simply stating a fact. That made it worse. The science officer's console beeped again. "Captain, they've launched something, small objects. They're moving into positions around us." "Missiles?" Yarl asked. "No, sir. More drones. Low energy output, hard to track. Likely part of a targeting grid." Yarl's claws flexed. The humans were making a net around them without firing a shot. They were controlling the field, controlling the pace, and now controlling the range. The voice of Captain Ward came one last time, softer now. "We can end this without damage to either side. But the decision is yours, Captain." The bridge was so silent Yarl could hear the faint hum of the environmental systems. He had the firepower to crush the Resolute, but everything in his instincts told him it would not be the quick, clean kill his people were used to. It would be a fight, and in that fight, the humans would not play by any rules he understood. And now, as the faint signatures of their reinforcements crept closer, the choice pressed heavier on him than any battle command he'd ever faced. The faint drive signatures in the nebula were no longer just background noise. They were clearer now, sharper, each one moving with deliberate purpose. On the KRYTH Dominion's tactical display, tiny red marks appeared on the edges of the grid, closing in from 3 directions. The bridge crew stared at them in silence, every officer knowing exactly what they meant. "Contacts now within 40,000 kilometers," the navigation officer reported, his voice tight. "Vector analysis suggests they're converging on us and the human vessel." The science officer added quietly, "Their signatures match human engine patterns, larger than the Resolute." Larger. That word settled over the crew like a shadow. If the small ship had been this dangerous alone, the thought of bigger ones was enough to pull every ounce of arrogance from the air. The communications officer turned from her station. "Captain, the Resolute has sent another transmission." The short, one line. 6 minutes. 6 minutes until what? The weapons officer demanded. "Until their reinforcements arrive," Yerl said before anyone else could answer. The crew shifted uncomfortably in their seats. On the display, the human ship had not moved from its position off the Dominion's rear quarter. It wasn't hiding, it wasn't backing away, and it wasn't rushing forward to attack. It was simply there, holding its ground like a sentry that knew help was on the way. The weapons officer's claws clicked against his console. "We could still destroy them now, before the others arrive." Yerl's eyes stayed fixed on the display. "If they were alone, yes. But you've seen how they operate. Do you really think they haven't accounted for that option?" The science officer nodded grimly. "They'd make sure we paid for every shot we fired. Even if we won, we'd be limping when the rest arrived." The navigation officer spoke again. "Captain, I've been running movement simulations. Those other contacts are positioning themselves to box us in. If we don't move now, we'll have one narrow exit. In 8 minutes, not even that." Yerl finally leaned back, his claws tapping the armrest in thought. He had been in battles before, but never in a situation like this. The humans hadn't fired a single weapon, yet they'd seized control of the entire engagement. They dictated the range, the timing, even the routes of escape. The communications officer's console lit up again. "Captain, the Resolute is transmitting openly to all frequencies now." She hesitated, listening for a moment before continuing. "They're broadcasting our position to their fleet." The weapons officer's voice rose. "They're marking us for a strike." "No," Yerl said slowly. "They're marking us for a decision. They're telling us they have us exactly where they want us, and we can either talk or fight their whole fleet." The nebula's dust swirled on the main screen, catching faint light from the Resolute's running lamps. The small ship remained steady, like it had anchored itself in that patch of space. No nervous adjustments, no wasted motion. Only patience. The science officer checked his readings again. "Captain, their weapons are still only partially powered. They're not pushing for a first strike." "That's the worst part," Yerl said. "They're leaving the choice to us. And they know we know it." The navigation officer interrupted. "New contact, North Vector. This big. Mass readings suggest it's one of their heavy warships." The display shifted, and a new signature began to form in the haze. Even half hidden by nebula gases, the sheer scale of it was obvious. Its energy output spiked briefly, enough to send a ripple across the Dominion sensors. The communications officer swallowed. "Captain, we're receiving a formal hailing signal from the incoming ship. Encryption is theirs, but the structure matches our military etiquette." Yerl's black eyes narrowed. "They're speaking our language again." "Yes, sir. And they're using all the proper codes as if they've studied us for years." The weapons officer's hands tightened on his console. "We can't let them surround us. If we're going to fight, it has to be now." But Yerl didn't give the order. He sat in silence, his gaze locked on the growing shape of the heavy warship, feeling the pressure of a truth he didn't want to admit. This was no longer a hunt. It hadn't been for some time. This was a negotiation, only the terms weren't being set by him. The 6 minutes passed faster than he expected. By the time the countdown hit 0, the heavy warship's outline was clear against the nebula's glow, and 2 more signatures appeared on either flank. The Dominion was no longer facing one human patrol vessel. It was facing an arrival formation designed to cut off every path but one, straight toward them. "Captain," the communications officer said quietly, "Captain Ward of the Resolute is requesting open dialogue. He says it's the last time he'll ask before his fleet takes over." The bridge was silent except for the steady hum of the systems. Yerl knew what his pride wanted him to say, but pride had no place here. This was a fight he could start, but not one he could finish on his own terms. He exhaled slowly. "Open the channel." The bridge fell into a stillness so deep that even the faint hiss of the air filters seemed loud. The comm channel clicked open, and the same steady human voice filled the Dominion's command deck. "Captain Yarrell," said Captain Ward, each syllable sharp and clear in perfect Chthorian. "Your presence in this sector has not gone unnoticed. We can discuss this now, peacefully, or the matter will be handled by my arriving fleet." Yarrell kept his gaze on the display. The Resolute still floated off their aft quarter, unshaken, its lights glowing faintly in the shifting clouds of the nebula. Beyond it, faint at first but growing clearer, the shapes of larger human ships emerged from the mist, sleek, angular, their drive signatures pulsing with measured strength. "You've moved quickly," Yarrell said, his tone even though every instinct told him this was a trap. "That's the point," Ward replied. "We don't give our opponents time to choose bad options." Yarrell's weapons officer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, "Captain, we could still break through before they close the gap, and leave our engines exposed to the ship behind us?" Yarrell's response was quiet but final. Ward continued, his tone calm but leaving no room for doubt. "You scanned us, Captain. You know we are not defenseless. You also know this vessel is not the largest in our navy. If this ends in a fight, it will cost you heavily." The words were measured, without boast or rage. That made them hit harder. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you want?" Yarrell asked at last. "A simple understanding," Ward said. "We don't enter your space, you don't enter ours. If we meet in neutral sectors, we do so without hostility. We can trade. We can talk. But we will not be intimidated." Yarrell's claws tapped slowly on the armrest. "You speak as though you're certain we will honor such an agreement." "I am certain you're wise enough to see the alternative," Ward replied. "You've gathered our data. You know our history. You know we have survived against enemies stronger than you. What matters to us is not winning every battle. It's making sure no one can take what's ours." The nebula clouds rolled outside the viewports, parting just enough for the silhouette of the human heavy warship to become clear. Its weapons were hot but not aimed directly at the Dominion. The posture was defensive, yet ready to change in an instant. Ward's voice came again, softer now. "I'm offering you the easiest way out of this situation. Take it and we both walk away without firing a shot. Refuse, and the next minutes will be unpredictable for everyone." The science officer on Yarrell's right shifted nervously. "Captain, they've locked targeting solutions on all our engines and weapon mounts. If they fire first, we'll lose mobility before we can return fire." "Confirmed," the weapons officer said reluctantly. Yarrell felt the weight of every eye on him. The Chthorian way was to dominate. But here, domination meant destruction. Maybe the humans, but destruction all the same. And for what? Pride? A small ship they'd thought was prey, now backed by a fleet? The choice was not really a choice. Yarrell leaned forward toward the comm. "Captain Ward, I accept your terms." There was a pause on the other end. Then Ward's voice returned, not gloating, not triumphant, just satisfied. "Then we have no quarrel. My fleet will hold position while you depart the sector. We will transmit the coordinates of the agreed neutral boundary within the hour." Yarrell's navigation officer exhaled as if a great weight had been lifted. The weapons officer said nothing, his eyes fixed on his console. The comm channel closed, leaving only the low hum of the ship's systems. On the main display, the human ships maintained their formation, not advancing, not retreating. The Resolute drifted slightly aside, clearing a path through the nebula. It was an open door, but also a reminder. They could have shut it whenever they wished. "Set course out of the sector," Yarrell ordered quietly. The Dominion turned slowly, its great hull sliding through the mist, past the silent human ships. Not a single weapon fired. Not a single shot had been exchanged. And yet the message was clear. These humans could not be measured by the crude scale of technological levels. As the nebula thinned and the human fleet faded into the distance, Yarrell sat back in his chair. This day would be remembered, not as a victory or a defeat, but as a revelation. The Chthorian Empire had found a species that did not bend under pressure, that could fight without firing, and that had the patience to hold the winning hand without playing it until the exact right moment. In the quiet of the bridge, Yarl spoke almost to himself. They looked like prey when we found them, but they were hunters all along. And far behind them, in the drifting glow of the nebula, the Resolute resumed its patrol, watching, waiting, ready for the next challenger who thought humanity was easy prey.